Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Louis Patler.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Mayor Fox, for your leadership and service. And from what I understand, I know it's in your DNA from your father to the present time. It's exciting to be here in Charlotte. It's good to see many familiar faces and some new faces. We have, as you know and can tell from the program, a full agenda. The conference theme was not long in the making, in the sense that it's pretty clear to everyone that we are at a crossroads in not only the industry, but across the world. The recession, the global downturn, whatever you wish to call it, does have an impact that ripples across everybody's landscape. I have preferred to use the term that we are in a global reset rather than a recession. And with the reset, it creates a baseline. And from that baseline, you find a number of opportunities. And that's what this conference is ostensibly focused on, how to become a flexible, adaptive company suited for these times, which are indeed fast-changing, fast-paced. And so we may as well make change our partner and our ally. So without further ado, we want to get to the first speaker of the day. This is a gentleman who I think all of you will recognize. You probably know some things about him already. He is the voice, and to my mind, really the soul of NASCAR. He lives locally. He has a long list of credits, 6 Emmy nominations and 3 Emmys. He has 30 years or more in the business of NASCAR. 43 wins, 6 championships, including Daytona 500 victory. But what you might not know about him is the strength of his character and his determination and perseverance. He knows how to bring a team together. There's an axiom in the business schools that the true test of a leader is it a leader that you would willingly follow, regardless of their role or the authority of the position they hold. Our next speaker exemplifies that. He also has succeeded in a sport that is incredibly unique. If you can imagine a sport such as NASCAR, where all of the competition, all the competitors, every Sunday gather together to face each other head on. Think of what that would mean within your industry if every day, every one of your competitors you had to deal with in a very unique and creative manner. So, without further ado, I want to bring up to the podium a man who you all come to know and respect and enjoy. He is just back from having been in Qatar and Iraq. He spent New Year's Eve in Iraq with our troops, the first year of the Iraqi war. He will, 3 weeks from now, when the day after the NASCAR circuit ends, he gets on a plane and he'll be going to Korea to meet with our troops. A true American, a true gentleman. I think you'll enjoy Jeff Hammond. So I'm going to go straight into introducing our first speaker this morning. Some of you may be aware of a fellowship that's offered in the U.S. called the MacArthur Fellowships. These are also referred to by the press as the Genius Awards. One of the aspects of the MacArthur Fellowships that I've always found quite interesting, because as a child I was exposed to an old American TV show called The Millionaire. The premise of the show was at the beginning of each show, a gentleman would arrive at the door of some unsuspecting person and then be given a check for $1 million. And the only strings attached were you can never try to find out where it came from, and you had to use it in the ways in which you felt that were best in terms of what you were already doing and working on. So the MacArthur Fellowships are very much like that. And our first speaker this year received what the so-called Genius Awards. I'm privileged to introduce to you Roland Fryer. Roland is the Robert Barron Professor of Economics at Harvard University, one of the youngest to ever receive that honor. He was instrumental and collaborated in the publication of the book which most of you are familiar with, which is Freakonomics. He has a unique perspective on not only things directly related to economics, but also he's very, very interested in education. And I have asked him to address a particular topic of interest because of the many initiatives going on right now within the company with regards to diversity. So without further ado, please give a warm welcome to Roland Fryer, who's going to talk to us about the business case for diversity. This is my last time to be in front of you today, and so Linda often asks me to do sort of a summary or wrap-up, and frequently that consists of a kind of a revisiting of each of the speakers sequentially and so on and so forth. But I want to approach it a little differently for my closing remarks today. Many of you, because of the quality of the speakers yesterday, and I think you would agree today, have asked me, how do we go about finding the speakers? How do we develop the theme? And I want to approach this by way of a couple of stories that to make a point. Some of you know that I do get to travel a lot, and one thing you might not know is that I play drums. All my life I've pounded on things. In fact, my nickname when I was about 2 years old was Tom Tom, because almost before I could walk, I would sit on the kitchen floor, turn over pots and pans, and start pounding. If you look at my iPhone wallpaper, it's a picture of about a dozen obscure small drums that I've collected all over the world. So what I do when I go to another country, if it's on business, I'll build in a day or two or three. And in every country around the world that I've been to, I go on a drum hunt. I start in the morning. I have no idea where the day is going to lead me, who I'm going to meet, what languages will be spoken, where I will eat, and one way or the other, by serendipity, to use one of the terms of one of our speakers, by using innovative tools and techniques. I'm not sure the combination, but to set out on that passage of starting without knowing the finish line is something that I've learned to love and to thrive on. So transpose that sort of approach and set of tools, if you will, to creating a theme and playing it out and finding the speakers for an occasion such as this. To me, it's very much the same process. We have initial meetings. We get a general idea of a theme. Let's say, for example, a theme like reimagine potential and redefine possibility. I think in the spirit of what Franz was saying, if everybody in this room were assigned those 4 words to develop a day and a half and build a day and a half around, you would get an idea of what the challenge and the opportunity is like. There were common themes that start to evolve, though, around those 2 terms, and you've heard the various speakers address these themes. So, for example, we have adaptive, dealing with change, making change your partner, innovation, and diversity. Now, what do all those things have in common, those terms? To be an adaptive company, to change ahead of the curve, making change your ally and your partner, and to innovate and thrive on diversity. Well, they all rest in a certain kind, as an individual, an incessant and insatiable curiosity. And as an organization, I think they have everything to do with creating a culture that can last and thrive and be sustainable. Now, many of you know that people in this room, such as Linda and Ian, have incredibly busy schedules. They have a lot of demands on their time, a lot of pressures, a lot of decisions to be made. Everybody in this room, I think, actually is in the same boat. What I will say, one thing about, for example, Linda and I, we're both insatiable readers. And we send things back and forth to one another. I know that some of you do that as well. And so we try to stay current by keeping that curiosity going. And last week, a publication came out. It's the annual Global Innovation 1000 publication by Booz & Company. And I sent it to Linda when I received it. And I know that people like Ethan do this with some regularity. They put the word out. But I wanted to read to you 3 or 4 sentences from the study called Why Culture is Key. The researchers, Barry Jaruzelski, John Lair, and Richard Holman say, the elements that make up a truly innovative company are many. A focused innovation strategy, a winning overall business strategy, deep customer insights, great talent, and the right set of capabilities to achieve successful execution. More important than any of the individual elements, however, is the role played by corporate culture, the organization's self-sustaining patterns of behaving, feeling, thinking, and believing, all of them together comprising the culture. Our data shows that companies with unsupportive cultures and poor strategic alignment significantly underperform their competitors. Then, they conclude by saying, we continue to emphasize the key finding in our Global Innovation 1000 study of the world's biggest spenders on research and development, which confirms the same thing for the past 7 years. There is no statistically significant relationship between financial performance and innovation spending in terms of either real total R&D dollars or R&D as a percentage of revenues. Many companies, notably Apple, consistently underspend their peers on a broad range of measures of corporate success, such as revenue growth, profit growth, and total shareholder return. Why is that so? In part because of a culture, a corporate culture that exists and is well-defined and is constantly being worked on and which thrives. Now, the name Steve Jobs has come up many times over the last 2 or 3 days, both by speakers and during the conversations around the dinner table and lunch table. My youngest son of my 5 kids finally graduated last December from college, got a job working for Apple. He comes home from their orientation program the first day, and he said, "You're not going to believe this, Dad. Sit down." And I said, "You've been fired already? You've only been on the job 24 hours?" No, he said, "Sit down." He said, "We just went through this orientation program, and we got to the section on innovation, and they have this list of 20 books recommended by Steve Jobs, and 2 of them are your books." And I was flabbergasted. I'd met Steve Jobs a couple of times, just social settings. I knew who he was. He would never know who I was. So we fast forward to about 4 weeks ago, a week before Steve Jobs' death. And I come upon an obscure article in the LA Times that in the last several months of Steve Jobs' life, almost all of his attention was devoted to the element of culture, building a culture within Apple. We all think of Apple right now, and rightly so, in terms of their products, innovative products that changed industries, changed the way things are made, changed the beauty and look and feel of a tangible product. But Steve Jobs, in his last year or so, began to have this sort of personal epiphany that he and his legacy had to be more than a compilation of his products. He decided to create intentionally Apple University. It's a well-kept secret so far. It's based on 5 core principles. These might not be the principles you would select or I would select, but these are the principles around which Apple University, once it's launched, will be based. First, accountability. Pretty clear, pretty common. Everybody has to be held accountable for doing their job, doing it well. And as Roland Fryer is fond of saying, if you want to also track people's behavior, you have to look at the incentives that you give them to behave in certain ways. A culture can do that. Second thing is attention to detail. Makes perfect sense to all of you who are engineers, most all of you who have P&L responsibilities, etc. The third component of Apple University is perfectionism. Now we're getting a little bit into the Wawa land. What would you attempt to do if you knew you could not fail, as well as if you knew you could fail? Counter that, or complement it, with the notion of simplicity, the ultimate form of sophistication. But there's one more. Secrecy. Imagine a culture in which one of its 5 pillars is secrecy. Why is that in there? What does that mean? What does that imply? In part, we've seen Apple create products which has, of course, a lot of build-up to them. And you have tens of thousands of employees who are all in this same cultural club, that they know what's going on. They've been party to portions of the development of the product and the construction and the dissemination of the products. But they hold it close at hand until it's time, as one group, to launch together. One of my favorite sayings coming out of the Silicon Valley goes back to the days when Scott McNealy was at Sun Microsystem. The saying there was, we want all the wood behind one arrowhead. I think that's what a good culture does, is it figures out ways to take these disparate pieces, these small elements, these laminates, if you will, of all the wood on that shaft of that arrowhead, and figures out a way to bring it all together. And I think that you are in a tipping point. This is a transition time for this company, for this industry, and actually, of course, for the entire world. And you can be a party to this, and I believe that the true legacy of all of this is going to come from building and growing a company's culture, one that will outlast any of us in this room and will be ultimately all of our legacy.